Hello, my name is Devin Reeder, and today I'd like to discuss police brutality and why I believe it should be the topic of a public service announcement. But before I go into that, I'd like to first define police brutality. According to encyclopedia.com, police brutality is defined as the use of any force exceeding that which is necessary to handle a particular situation when dealing with civilians. Now that I've defined police brutality, I'd like to move on to my points as to why it should be the topic of a PSA. First of all, police brutality needs a PSA in order to silence skeptics. According to an article by CNN, while it appears that occurrences of police brutality are on the rise, is in fact only reports that are on the rise. This means that more people are paying attention as these events unfold. But in order to successfully get rid of it, we need to alleviate skepticism altogether. By alleviating skepticism in U.S. citizens, they can more effectively recognize when police brutality occurs and more effectively report it. Secondly, I believe that police brutality should be the topic of a PSA because American citizens, colored or otherwise, should not have to live in fear of law enforcement officials. According to The Counted, a database by The Guardian that actively counts the number of people killed by police, 823 deaths have occurred just in 2015 alone from police brutality. If that number seems high, that's because it is. And with blacks being killed at 2.5 times the rate of whites and Latinos, you can see why even I would be fearful of my life when dealing with these law enforcement officials. By increasing feelings of safety and respect within citizens of the United States toward law enforcement officials, we can relieve tension between the two parties and ultimately reduce the amount of occurrences of police brutality within the United States. Thirdly and lastly, police brutality needs a PSA because we need to be able to call our law enforcement officials to be more accountable for each other. According to stats by the Department of Justice, there are currently 765,000 full-time state and local law enforcement officials in the United States. With so many officers, it'd be very hard-pressed for one or two organizations to keep tabs on them. However, if law enforcement officers were to be more accountable with each other, then we would have increased reporting, reduced occurrences of police brutality due to discouragement, and we would be able to severely reduce the occurrences of police brutality in the United States. To conclude, the purpose of my presentation is to discuss police brutality and why it should have its own public service announcement. The presentation focused on three main points. Police brutality should have its own PSA in order to silence skeptics. It should have its own PSA because American citizens, white or colored, should not have to live in fear of law enforcement officials. And thirdly, it should have its own PSA because we need to call for our law enforcement officials to be more accountable for each other. By pushing this issue further into the light, we can severely reduce occurrences and ultimately end police brutality in the United States.